Welcome to Conversations with Craig. I'm your host, Craig Lee. I've worked with many leaders throughout my career. I have learned from some wonderful mentors, and in turn, I've helped a range of people as they grow and evolve professionally. Join me fortnightly as I shine a light on leaders who influence others to deliver outcomes that make our society a better place. These leaders are candid about the fun and difficult times over their career journeys. You'll also note they are all passionate about their work. So whether you're leading a small team or navigating an enterprise, join me to explore what real leaders do to make an impact and learn some lessons from their experiences that may be useful to anyone who is starting, building, or struggling in their own leadership journey. This episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Rowenna Walker. Rowenna is a civil engineer who is also the Managing Director for the ACT in New South Wales with the Aurecon Group. Aurecon is a professional services firm that services the Asia Pacific. So, welcome to Rowenna Walker. You're the CEO of Aurecon in New South Wales and the ACT, I understand.
Managing Director for New South Wales.
Oh, Managing Director,
for Aurecon.
Yeah, okay. So I really appreciate your time today. What was a project or a role that really stood out for you in your early days?
Yeah, look, I think certainly early in my career, I was working for a contractor,
right,
as an undergrad in the UK,
right,
in the sort of road construction space. I'd worked for a year in my undergrad course and got sponsored in my final year, and then went on to a road widening project as a graduate. During that time, I was on a project that wasn't as exciting as an undergrad, so I was really contemplating, oh gosh, is this the right thing? And then suddenly, and I think this is sort of where, serendipity comes into things, nothing's planned. It's around the opportunities that come up suddenly. And in those days, it was a physical memo on a notice board. It said site engineers wanted in Hong Kong to work on the Lantau Airport Railway. So at that point in time, they were building the new airport in Hong Kong. And so my gut feel, I was living at home. I had a student debt. I had a car that kept breaking down. So it didn't take me long to think, that's a really good opportunity. I'm going. And interestingly, I think, when you reflect on these things, that changed the trajectory of my career, because I went into work into rail, and of which that's really been my background for the last, 20 odd years.
Right.
In rail, and really set me up, and I had an amazing time. I met some great people who I'm still friends with today, from a personal and a work perspective. It's just interesting, some of those what feel like small things and decisions you make can change the rest of your career.
Yeah, so I found that a lot of people early in their careers see an opportunity, especially when they're young, and they're not. There's no inhibitions; they'll go for it.
Exactly. Yeah. You're not encumbered with a whole range of stuff. You can be later on in your career, and so sometimes these decisions are kind of easier to make.
How long did that last for?
So I was there on that project. Initially, it was a year. Then extended it for another year. So I was there for about 2 years.
2 years.
But then, interestingly,
right
after that, I thought, I know. At the end of that, rather than go straight back and come to the UK, I'll just, I'm halfway to Australia. Why don't I check out Australia? So that was the seed of me ended up being here. Another sort of while later after that. So so that whole experience kind of has really probably seeded why I'm here today.
Right. So were there any? You mentioned a couple of things there that set you up. Were there any real key lessons that you learned, particularly that you might still think about that you apply today in your role today?
I think, and it's about taking those opportunities when they come up, because once they've gone, they've gone.
Yeah.
And recognising that they never come out at the perfect time.
Yeah.
I think I always, like the idea of travel, like the idea of, sustainable forms of transport like rail. And so that helped me make that decision. But I think, that piece around, if there's a good opportunity, then take it and work out how you're going to do it later. Yeah. Don't worry about it too much.
And do you still think like that today?
I think so. I mean, obviously, different phase of life and different phase of your career, but certainly recognising the opportunity in something that you don't know in a place that you don't know is quite exciting.
Right. Were you exposed to any mentors in those early days?
I'm a chartered civil engineer, and in the UK, the system goes through the Institution of Civil Engineers. So there was, and in that time, there's quite a formal process of chartership. So through the chartership process, the project director on that project, I spent a lot of time with him because he was called a supervising civil engineer as part of my training. And so I think informally, from a sort of technical professional point of view, he was kind of probably my first mentor, and certainly the company I was with, a lot of the senior people really invested in a number of the graduates, and I took a lot of value from those relationships and advice that I had.
Okay. So growing up, early life and education and sports and activities. So where were you born? You said the UK, but where?
Yeah, so I was born in the UK, a place called Croydon, South London.
Okay.
There's various Croydons in Australia, for example, which were named after the one that I was born in.
Yeah.
I was, my parents my dad was, background as an economist, researcher for the Labour Party in the UK, Amnesty International, and then sort of when moved into sort of management consulting. My mum, they were both involved in politics, so there was sort of a very big piece around social justice. She worked for, again, the Labour Party. She worked for the International Socialist Democratic Women, which is an international movement at the time.
Right.
And in the 1970s, when I was born, she gave up work when I was born, but she was, quite senior in her role. She'd previously been a teacher as well. And then she concentrated on in local politics and being a local councillor. So she was mayor of Croydon.
Oh, right.
And I was her mayoress. So, so that's it's an interesting experience. So, lots got involved in that side of things on top of the day job, which was interesting. But so they weren't engineers. Sort of reasonably. They were both university educated, so the expectation was that I would go on, and my brother would go on to university education. Parents divorced when I was a teenager, so I think everyone's experience is different, but certainly probably that sort of gave me an opportunity to do my own thing under the radar. And certainly they were very liberal in their approach, but also very encouraging in, whatever I wanted to do and supportive. But I was a bit of an anomaly in liking maths and physics, so they kind of just encouraged me to do what I wanted to do.
So why did you pick, you're strong in maths and physics, why engineering?
So I went to sixth form college, which is essentially equivalent in Australia, sort of year 11, 12.
Yep.
I took my A-levels and I did 3 A-levels. I did maths, physics and economics. And I had no clue what I wanted to do, and went to my careers teacher and said, well, I don't, what should I do in terms of going to university? I had to fill this form in. And he suggested civil engineering. I said, what's that? And he sort of explained a bit more. I kind of sort of got it. And he said, if you like maths and physics, you'll probably get on okay. I don't reckon I worked out what civil engineering really was until later on in my degree course, because I didn't think civil engineers were very good at explaining what they actually did.
You're right.
So there was no predestined. I wasn't one of those people that wanted to be an engineer from a young age, but it was just having an interest in those kind of subjects, really.
Well, I reckon the careers advisor would be pretty chuffed too, because I imagine they give a lot of kids advice and someone actually followed the path that they recommended.
Yeah, and I think credit to him, particularly a female. I mean, in those were sort of late 80s, probably wouldn't have been a normal piece of advice. Girls would tend to be steered towards other professions, and so probably reasonably progressive in his advice, and and here I am today watching it as well.
Okay, and where did you go to university?
So I went to uni in Nottingham, which is in the Midlands of the UK. I actually went to what was in the UK called a polytechnic, or technical college, and then later became university. So it's actually quite an applied course, which is, I mentioned before, so I did an industrial placement in the third year. We did a lot of hands-on surveying and that type of thing. So I think that really helped me understand engineering, and we were quite employable as undergrads because we were pretty useful because we'd been on site and we could set out surveying.
Okay. So what's your family situation now?
So I'm married to Stuart. So he's an engineer as well. So
did you meet him here or the UK?
I met him in the UK.
Right.
I then went to a company called Scott Wilson, who then came URS and then Aurecon.
Okay. Right.
And my husband had just got back from doing a backpacking year around Australia, and I'd not long got back from Hong Kong, and I joined him at Scott Wilson, and he taught me how to run a rail software modelling, and we had a good crowd. So we met at work, and then he was the one that was desperate to go back to Australia and convinced me to go over and So
that's sowed the seed for the Australia.
That's and then then we got married. In fact, we got married here and in the UK, had 2 weddings, and we've got 2 boys.
Okay.
So they're 6. Well, one's turning 16 next week and 18 in July. So year 10 and 12.
Oh yeah, the fun years.
Yes.
You sort of mentioned you started with a contractor and went.
So with a contractor, then I did my design year, which went with my husband. I went back to working for a contractor. Worked on a big alliance project as a senior engineer.
What sort of project was that one?
So it was it was called West Coast Route Modernisation. So essentially, they were putting a new tilting train technology on one of the rail lines between London and Manchester.
Yeah.
And so they had to obviously upgrade the track and all the infrastructure to support the new types of trains. That was a really interesting project. But I suppose it was at that point that made me realise, what's next after this project, and recognising that it's quite a tough world in contracting where you just go where the work is. And I just sort of bought my first flat, and it was enjoying London. Thought I really don't want to be living somewhere else and travelling every weekend. So I got chartered, and once you're chartered in the UK, sort of it's a next level of, and you've got a ticket to play for other roles. So I ended up actually getting a role client side on West Coast Route Mod, doing more project management.
Okay.
I then actually went into the engineering function after that, before I came to Australia. So I basically done contractor, done consultancy, gone into the client side, and then when we came to Australia, I worked for Rail Corp for a year.
Right.
So which was a great experience in terms of obviously understanding the rail network.
Did you have that lined up before you got here, or did you?
Yes. Yeah. So we got our skilled migration.
All right.
And then we secured jobs. I think it was only a contracting job.
Yeah. And did your husband the same? Did he?
We actually worked in the same department. He was doing more the design, and I was doing more of the sort of engineering.
Okay.
So that was and then I think at the time Rail Court was going, as you know, as in the public sector, tends to go through a lot of changes, and I didn't feel that was somewhere where I wanted to stay. The culture was, not the type of place that was really giving me a sense of this where I wanted to be.
Okay.
And so I started looking around, and I secured a role with SKM at the time. The Rail Clear Waste project in New South Wales was just getting going in terms of investment in upgrading the rail network.
Yep.
So it was this very small group, and we won our first project in growing that rail business, which then sort of took off from there. So I stayed with SKM, then became Jacobs, and then joined Aurecon 8 years ago. So so that's sort of been my pathway. I've had engineering roles, to start out with, and then I was keen to look at more business management and business leadership roles. I applied for 2 business leadership roles in Sydney, where I was based.
This is with Aurecon now.
So this is with SKM.
SKM, sorry.
And so this is probably another kind of turning point in my career.
Right.
And I was unsuccessful in both, which obviously was clearly very disappointing at the time. And I thought, gosh, if, I can't get 2, I've gone for 2 roles, and, there aren't going to be that many in this location. But the great thing was my sort of manager at the time said, well, appreciate, you didn't get any of these gigs, but hey, look, there's a role in New Zealand. Are you interested in that one? And again, sort of turning to the great opportunity. Clearly different situation to when I was a grad, but turned around to a husband who, I was convinced would not want to leave Australia. I just said, there's this opportunity in New Zealand. This is going to be a great career move for me. And he said, look, I think I can get transfer with my company, and why don't we go? So we took a 3 and a 5-year-old to New Zealand, and we had a different market and different role. We did no rail. It was roads and buildings. It was post Christchurch earthquake. So again, really interesting.
So you did a bit of work with it. That's called skirting.
Yeah, so I was out in Christchurch. We were all part of the skirt project, and so that was a great sort of experience. And then in that role, I did start to do more of a market role as well as my operational leadership role. So that sort of gave me a taste of then wanting to move into a market role, which is what I did as my next career move.
So you were in with SKM in New Zealand?
Yes, and then Jacobs were...
and I was circling.
We were circling to look at sort of basically an M&A by buying out SKM.
Yep.
Which they did
which was a private company, wasn't it? So,
yes, So they did that in December 2013, and that was a point, obviously, that they, looked at, okay, so what's next in terms of, because it's a new structure, a new approach. So one of the great things about Jacobs was they had a really, in my mind, a very good professionalised approach to client relationships. So I was keen to, learn a lot in that space. So I took on a more of a, what was called they called it outside sales, a market BD role in the rail part of the business, looking after APAC.
Yes. So not just New Zealand, the whole.
No, I moved back to Sydney, so I could, move back home if you like, and do that role out of Sydney.
Right.
So that was sort of a next move, and it kind of more of that sort of moving sideways and broadening experience type thing. So I did that for a couple of years before moving to Aurecon.
How did that come?
Yeah, so I think I think it's we might talk about this a bit later around understanding what's important to you individually and values and what you you really emote to in terms of the environment you're in. I think some great things about Jacobs, but also what I struggled with, I guess, to a certain degree, was that the culture, the US culture, had just a different approach to how they saw people and how they treated people, and it's not right or wrong. It's just different.
It's different, yeah.
And that was something that really challenged me, because SCAM had been a massive investor in people from an L&D perspective, development, and more of a cultural piece. And then also what was the next steps in my career, and then I had some people that I had worked previously at Aurecon. Guillaume Swigers, who's now our chair, was the CEO and was doing some quite progressive, exciting things in terms of a refresh strategy.
Right.
So that was the other thing that that really, drew me to come to Aurecon.
What do you think makes a good leader?
I think a lot of what I see as the positive attributes of a leader are influenced by the good leaders that I have followed. And also I aspire to, I don't know if you've read Kristen Ferguson's modern leader book around the head and the heart leader.
I haven't read it.
No. So she talks about sort of that head and heart leader and the art of modern leadership. And there's a lot of things that I really emote to. So the piece for me, having humility, being self-aware, having empathy and compassion, including and balancing that with, ability to make good business decisions. It's those sort of human attributes that really enable me to connect with a good leader and the type of leader that I aspire to be. I think courage, particularly in the current environment, it's very easy not to make decisions, but it's harder to make decisions because they can go wrong. And so I think courage is a key one. If you've got the right, convictions and the values, and you're doing things for the right reason, and you can articulate that, then people respect that.
Okay. So are there any sort of common themes that you pick up that where people just need a bit of help to become a better leader and can move into a position of leadership?
I've benefited by having some great investment in my development, and I think about some of the things that have really helped me, and I've seen help others. So I think that investment in self-awareness, understand your strengths, and the things that you might not be good at. So using diagnostics to help do that, but also having a good coach.
Mm-hmm.
Good coach will give you that frank and fearless feedback and help you build on your strengths. And so, I think certainly the people that I've led is recognising the value I've got out of that type of support and development, and then affording that to them. And those that really make the most of it, I've seen, completely thrive. So I think that's those kind of pieces of investment are really important. Yeah, and really that sort of strength-based piece, which is once you understand your strengths, you can build on your strengths, because if you invest in your strengths, you'll get a high multiplication factor than if you focus on your weak spots, and you won't get so much. But you surround yourself with people that are good at things you're not so good at. And I think the other thing is we, especially as engineers, for example, we get rewarded on being good at what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so the step from going to be a good technical engineer or project manager to the next level is you don't have the time, and you have to trust people to do the things that you were rewarded for, and you were good at, and you could control. So it's a real where I've seen that transition of people that can do that can go, I've got to be at peace with not being able to be in control of all this because I can't. and trust other people.
Which, did you have any goals when you were early in your career? And if you did, have they changed over time?
Yeah, sure. I think, my first goal, as I said before, was, I was set on getting chartered. I think that was my first, and I kind of went after that pretty hard. I reckon, that was a sort of a ticket to go to play. So, and so it's really interesting. Once I got that chartership, it was like, okay, well, what next? And, kind of considered, other people do, I'm going to do an MBA. I sort of put that on the back burner and, thought, let me see how, let's concentrate on doing the job first. So yeah, goals, I guess, change over time. So it's about technical leadership, and then obviously moving into business leadership, and people leadership. That was my next goal, and then that took me to that New Zealand role. And then the market leadership. Interestingly, when I was in New Zealand, that's when I sort of first started to get into understanding a bit about governance and being on a board.
Okay.
So that sort of piqued my interest. That I did a 1-day course. I ended up being a trustee on a childcare organisation that was at the local church, and that sort of piqued my interest. And then actually, when I came back to Australia, I did the AICD course, and then I started to get onto board. So again, those goals change, and that's probably really my longer term aspiration, is to have a portfolio career. But yeah, I've still probably got a bit more exec roles left to go. Yeah. But prior to that, but that's sort of how things have evolved.
Sort of links back to your earlier comment about people, when we're talking about leaders and what they could do to improve and where they need to go, and the goals, setting yourself goals as you evolve in your career helps you move into out of those, say, comfort zones.
Yeah, and recognise that, those strengths piece.
Yeah.
So for me,
piece, yeah.
I was probably not as a great technical engineer, so I was never going to be at my peak, and recognising that I got on well with people, and I really enjoyed working with people, and so the people leadership and the client piece was something that I felt at ease with, and I was really invested in. So, sort of that helps you, carve and change those goals as you go along.
Okay. You're a managing director within the Aurecon group. So what does Aurecon do? And what's Aurecon all about?
So Aurecon is an engineering design advisory firm. They're a Asia Pac footprint. So we've got about 7,000 people across Australia, New Zealand, and a number of countries in Asia. We're a private company, management owned. So again, that sort of shapes the culture somewhat. We've got quite a mix of long-term, long-tenured people who've been in our business for a long time. So, for example, our CEO, Bill Cox, has been with the firm for 35 years.
Right.
So that's the nature of the company. We work across a number of sectors. So defence, the energy sector, water, transport, and the built environment. So, we've been involved in, and if I kind of use New South Wales and ACT, major road projects like West Connects, North Connects, been involved in a number of rail projects, particularly the metros, City and Southwest, and in the built environment. So we've been strong in delivering on stadia. So we designed the Sydney Football Stadium, for example. We're now working we have been working in the energy sector, but more recently with the energy transition.
Right. So
the renewable energy zones. So we're working with Fiona on the Central West Rowenna renewable energy zone, on the transmission lines as well. So HumeLink. So a whole variety of things. We're in terms of water, we're working with Sydney Water. We're 5 years into the Sydney Water planning partnership, which is working with them on looking at long-term plans for the water network in and around Sydney. So, and then in defence, we've been working with Defence on the PDS program, which is the upgrade of a whole range of all their facilities across Australia. So, quite a wide variety of sectors and activities in, whether it be working client side in DNC delivery as well.
So you mentioned it's a privately owned company, management owned. So you have to achieve a certain level before you're invited to acquire shares. Is that how it works? Yeah.
So I mean, certainly the philosophy is around sort of no more than sort of about 8% of the if the employees are owners, okay. And so really the expectation is that the leaders and the managers are owners. So we kind of got that sort of technical director level is really the entry level as to being invited to be an owner. So just because you get to a level doesn't automatically you still need to. We've refined the process. It's highly competitive. We're a successful firm, and the returns more recently have been very good. But as with all risk, when you invest, because it's a big investment from a personal point of view, and really the broader philosophy is that as an owner, you're there for a point in time, and you leave the business in a better state than when you entered. And so that's sort of that ongoing legacy of a business, and you're just that custodian at a time.
Right. Yeah, I think it's very important, private ownership, and it's just one of those things. As you say, the owners can't look around for someone else to save them. They've got to work together to make that
absolutely
tough times and then grow in the good times. So your position, I incorrectly said it was at the start, Managing Director for New South Wales and the ACT. So what is it that you do in that role on a day-to-day basis?
It's a good question.
Probably going to be a lot more on this, but I have to summarize
it depends who you ask. It's my kids just sitting on email and sitting on a phone and chatting to people. One of the great things about this role is the variety of what I do.
Yeah.
So, and again, that changes from week to week, day to day. Clearly, as a P&L owner, a lot of it's around financial performance. So, in my business, I've got 1,000 people. So that's a lot of people to make sure they're busy and are operating profitably. So obviously making sure our clients are happy, making sure that we're performing well, we're making a profit, making sure that we're behaving safely with our people, sure that we're providing quality outputs. And then obviously then the people side of things, which is, I think it's one dress to make that, the people side of things, like, in my mind, in a very simplified view, I think if you look after your people well, then everything else will look after itself. So having the right people for me, so making sure I've got the right leadership team, that we create the right environment, that we're nurturing our good talent. I think, the key thing is around communication. I'm a real believer about performance and care. So holding people to account, but, caring for people at the same time, creating a culture for people to thrive, that psychologically safe culture, to speak up and also feel like they've got a future career. So that, that there's a lot of internal piece around development and nurturing and all the processes that go around that. Be REM reviews and investigations and employee surveys and that type of thing. Obviously as a leader in the region of, doing town halls, I walk around the office and talk to people. And then there's all the sort of internal piece around all the finance and the metrics. And then the other element for me, and which I really value, is connections to the market.
Right.
So, you know, being really connected to industry, I think, you know, in our experience at Consult Australia, you know, those broader relationships with your peers are really good connections to have, as well as with the clients and just having that broader radar up. So yeah, those are probably kind of the key things, is that external piece, the people, and then obviously the finance.
Yeah, it's very busy, isn't it? So your profit and loss at Aurecon runs through a regional basis rather than a discipline basis. So the disciplines all come through with that. Yeah, that piece there. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I'd imagine there's a group or a global strategy, and then you've got a strategy you develop that dovetails into that. Yeah.
So the Aurecon we call it the blueprint, and that's our strategy. That's our key document that's developed at a enterprise level, that's developed with the group executive and the board. At Aurecon, we have been revisiting that every 2 years, so we sort of evolve the blueprint. And then, at a regional level, then we say, what does that mean for us in the regional context with the clients that we have and the environment that we have? And then how do we implement that? And so, we develop that as a leadership team in the region, and then put things in place.
And then I imagine you'd have a seat at the table for the overall blueprint. Do you have input to that?
Yeah. So we feed up and down, and so we have a broader group called the L50, which is the top leaders in the business, and so that so used as a test bed to feed and develop. And we had we have an ongoing role in shaping that and feeding it up and down.
Okay. So how long have you been in this role, the managing director role?
So I started this role on the 1st of March 2020.
Okay.
And I know that it's because COVID happened on the 15th.
Right.
So when I started this role, it was going to be quite different in my mind than what it actually was from the 15th of March.
Yes, the pandemic. Those days were fun. So that leads well into my next question. In that time, so that's 4 years, could you single out a project or an outcome that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, look, I think there's probably a few things that I'm particularly proud of. I think I'm very proud of how we led through the COVID pandemic. I think certainly, and this probably goes for a lot of firms, they didn't necessarily have all the platforms like the work from home and all of the, everything in the cloud. I think we worked really hard to make stuff work. And the culture, I think the culture and the leadership helped us do that when we didn't necessarily have all the tools in the box. So I think I was really proud that we were able to continue to, and in fact, our productivity and our delivery to clients actually, just continued, and there was not a blip. And we got some great feedback around that. So, and I think the other piece was we really cared for our people. We checked in on those, in those days, getting COVID was, it potentially fatal. People also, we have a lot of people, as Australia do in general, that had family overseas that couldn't see them or were very sick with COVID. So supporting people through those, very tricky times. And, if you remember, people were in isolation and trying to get back to Australia and all these things. So I'm really proud of that. And so it was a really good opportunity for us to relook at our workplace locations. So we ended up moving our Sydney office, which had been in the same place for 25 years. And it was just opportunistic, and we created a really great environment in North Sydney. We've done the same in Canberra now and in Newcastle, to the point where I talk to colleagues, not only in our sector, but in other sectors who are struggling to fill their offices. Our office is oversubscribed and we're having to put more desks in. So we've created this sort of magnet and this environment that people actually want to be.
That's great.
In the office. We don't mandate working in the office. We have a philosophy of recommending hybrid working, 2 to 3 days in the office, empowering people to make the right decisions on what's best for them and their work community.
Yeah.
And there isn't a full stop after what's best for them. It's what's best for you and your work community. And you develop as a team charter about how you all going to work together. And I guess the other third one is in the time, go back to the people piece, the time I've been in this role, the leadership team I had at the start, who were all fantastic, by the way, and that all credit to my predecessor, have generally, that whole team has almost evolved into a brand new team because those people have all gone into the next step in their career.
Okay.
And I'm really proud of that.
That's great.
And most people go, oh, it's, that's a bit sad, or, gosh, you're kind of having to work hard into the next generation. But for me, that's all credit to investing in people, their careers, and some of them have moved into things they never thought they'd move into. And I'm really proud of it. So those aren't necessarily projects, if you like, because we've got some great projects that we do work on corporately. But I guess in my role, leading people and leading a community, which is New South Wales and ACT, those are some of the things that I'm particularly proud of.
No, that's great. That's great to hear. And if I just a personal observation from me, I think I visited you a couple of months back. And you can always tell when you walk into an environment by the person you speak to at the reception. And she was absolutely lovely. And I sat over in, I think you call it the library, and I was having a look at all the awards that Aurecon has. And one of your team came over and was just speaking to me, and he was lovely, just making me feel welcome, and said, "Oh, Rowena always talks to people out here, which is great. Like, it's not, you don't go to Rowena's office, Rowena comes to you, or you talk to her." And I think you can see that culture. You can't manufacture that. What else do you do outside of being the managing director for Aurecon here in New South Wales and the ACT?
I'm really passionate about sort of driving that change through collaboration and through industry organisations. Obviously I was on the board for Consult Australia for 6 years, and the last 2 as president stepped down in October. Still involved in Consult about that organisation and supportive of everything that they're doing. I'm involved in a number of other organisations, for example, the Minerva Network, which is a network that was brought around to support female elite athletes transition from sport into professional career.
So what's it called, that group?
The Minerva Network.
Okay, Minerva Network.
And so they essentially match elite athletes with senior business women,
right?
As mentors to think about, talk to them about, how might they continue to nurture their their next career after their sporting career.
Yep.
Yes, I'm a mentor for a Australian rower, who's planning to go to the Paris Olympics, and have previously been in the squad for Tokyo. She's a water engineer, and she was keen to see what she could still do while she was training, because obviously training takes up a lot of time. But again, flexible working enables athletes to maybe do some part-time roles and contract roles. So I'm on Chief Executive Women. So again, that's that sort of gender, supporting women throughout their careers, and other industry organisations like IPA and CEDA. So I'm a mentor for the IPA Women in Mentoring program. I've done similar women in mentoring programs.
IPA being Institute of...
Infrastructure Partnerships Australia.
Infrastructure Partnerships.
Yeah.
Right.
And I've done a similar thing for Australasian Rail Authority.
Okay.
ARA. So, and then I've been involved in supporting Committee for Sydney. So there's some great initiatives around public transport for Committee for Sydney as well. So a lot of sort of broader industry involvement, the construction industry leadership group we just started getting involved in, which is cross jurisdiction, cross state government agencies, the contractors and Consult Australia. So we talked about more recently modern methods of construction, innovation and productivity. So a lot of those more sort of broader topics that we can only do collectively as an industry.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Well, you're a very, very busy person, and you give a lot to a lot of people. Who supports you? Do you have a mentor or a support network, or how do you,
absolutely,
when you have to go to the balcony and scream?
Yeah, so my primary support is my family, my immediate family, so my husband and two sons. I think it would be, I definitely have to call them out. And look, I think I've been lucky enough to have a number of mentors and sponsors, and I sort of am lucky enough to be able to call on a variety of them. A lot of them, I can reach out on the phone and text and run some things past them, and whether they be people I've worked with previously in different roles, and they give me some good advice. I've had various career coaches supported through.
Do you have a coach now?
I don't have a current one at the moment, but yeah, I've had variety of number of them throughout. I'm attending a program at the moment called the Mentor List, which is a collective of executives, cross industry, and we have a speaker on a common topic that would be relevant to all of us. So that's my sort of development at the moment.
Yeah. Making tough calls. Be able to share, you don't have to give too many specifics, but a particularly tough call you had to make, because you do get these in these sort of roles, and they can be quite agonising. And if you're able to outline maybe the circumstance and how you went about it and what your thinking was.
That's the the rubber hits the road part of this role, right? You're the one that needs to make these calls. I think the key ones are particularly around redundancies. I think those are that's the hardest part of this type of role, and because the reality is making someone redundant is a massive impact on an individual's life.
Yeah.
I first, and I've unfortunately had to do that a number of times throughout my career. First sort of time I had to do that was working for SKM, a small team in the UK, and it was around the GFC.
Okay.
Whilst these things impact people and you can't save everyone, explaining the why, is, and the rationale, is, and how you do that, and how you understand the situation of the individual, the support that you can provide them, and making sure you do that with dignity and care, I think is the most important. So I think, first of all, really testing, making sure you've really tested and challenged the business challenge, which might be workload. As it's an example I said to you before, where, client just stops program of work, that's it, and taps off. And it's quite clear that there's no immediate sort of start of the play button again. And that is what it is, and making sure that you've spent enough time considering, redeploying people, looking at the options, feel as though you've done everything you can without it taking too long, because there's a real balance, right, between you could drag these things out, but that's not fair on the individual, and that has a broader impact on the business. So making sure you've really explored every avenue in a reasonable length of time, and then treating the individual with respect and the care and giving them the support is really the piece for me, and making sure that you own that because sometimes things don't go so well in that process. Everyone reacts very differently. You might, hopefully you don't make the wrong decisions. I think you can only make the decision with the information that you have at the time. So, unfortunately, having done that a few times, making sure you can, and not expecting everyone to do that job for you, making sure that either you do it or you support those that are struggling to have to deliver that message as well.
Yeah. No, I think I'd have to agree with that. It's probably the toughest thing I've ever had to do too. It's not easy. And what do you think that some of the opportunities and threats are for the business in the next decade and a half?
Yeah, look, I think you always say, "Oh, this is the biggest decade of change," but I think I think we've got to look at things like automation and AI and how that will impact our industry, and it will, and it is. And so, what was a traditional consulting model, and some might call refer to the leverage model, and what kind of is. I think that's going to be completely disrupted. We're already, we have teams who are, offshore, remote, in different centres, and we're already looking at ways in which we're automating things. So, the way we work, and also our clients, quite honestly, are looking for value for money and saying, well, this should be costing you less and costing me less as a client. And, that whether they're government or private sector, they've got to show value for money. So I think and also the problems that our clients have are becoming so much more complex. I think if I look back into, historically 20, 30 years ago, things it always felt more simple. There was always a simple answer, and maybe it was everything was standard. I think now things are changing. Technology solutions, different ways of doing things. Different competition. We've got tech companies as our competition, for example. So industry is changing. So that technology, AI, automation, what our clients are needing. I mean, clearly, obviously, more broadly, we've got the geopolitical context. So some things are beyond our control in, how governments, institutions will respond to that. We're in climate change is real, and we are all rapidly trying to decarbonise. So we have a whole different market. So how do us as businesses respond to that? So it's being disrupted from a commercial perspective, the shape of our people. Do we need more senior people because everything else is going to be automated? Do people, are they going to have less technical skills and more people skills? How does that manifest itself in graduates, in, how we reward people, how we promote people, how we train people and some of their learning and development needs. So all of that I find fascinating.
Yeah.
For some people, they find that they're quite fearful of that.
Yeah.
Quite naturally, because they've known the environment, they're comfortable in an environment, and the market they serve and the role that they do day to day, and something that's quite different to that could be unknown is quite a challenge. So how do you bring people along the journey and give them confidence, tell them it's okay, and provide them with, whether it be the training or the support to do that, as well as reshape your business when you don't know what that might be. How
do you give that sense of direction to your people so that they feel confident in it, but you're not missing opportunity as well?
Absolutely. Like, I think, in every firm will have its own sort of risk appetite as well. So there's a combination. So as I said before, if Aurecon, we're shaped, our strategy document you call the blueprint. That gives us some key areas that we are focused on. So that, and that doesn't change. Well, obviously it changes every 2 years, but it's evolving. It's not dramatically changing, and it is responding to the market.
Sorry, that's refreshed every 2 years, is it?
Yes, and that's how we look at it, and obviously we're constantly monitoring that. So I think for me that's the stability piece, is so you're not sort of chopping and changing and being reactionary to something, and certainly that's a well thought out document with that future proofing piece in mind. The recognition that there's only a limited amount of funds and capex, and how do we help our clients, make the most of the assets they do have, and how do you leverage off that, and from a sustainability point of view, how might they recognise that asset is, you can build on that rather than a brand new rather than adding a more carbon intensive piece of asset, and also the response, is that asset going to be fit for purpose in 5-10 years, depending, whether it be because you're going to have EV vehicles, or you're not going to have vehicles, you're not going to have a car park, or you're not going to need smoke extraction from vehicle fuel, or the shoreline is going to be here and not here, or the water needs are going to drastically change because of drought. And so,
what advice would you have for a young person who's just finishing up university? They might have an engineering degree, or they might be looking at the consulting world or the construction world, the industries you've been in anyway. Any advice you'd give your younger self that might sort of translate to somebody else who's thinking about coming into the industry?
I think, the first thing is, going back to the decisions I made, take every opportunity that comes to you. I think that'll be the first piece of advice. I think that certainly has benefited me in my career. Do something that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Because if you do something you enjoy and also you're good at, then that will definitely stand you in good stead in terms of the joy you get from life and the satisfaction in what you do.
Yep.
Having joy in what you do every day and purpose is really important aspects, because if you don't, then it's not particularly great life, I don't think, in the long term.
Yeah.
Don't make assumptions. I think there's a lot more opportunity. There aren't so many black and white boundaries, particularly whether it be consulting or any other industry. As we've talked about, our industry has changed dramatically. The careers you can have, what I started in the industry and what the career opportunities now are so different, and that's exciting.
Yeah.
The 3 professions that you can travel with, and I think travel is another part of that diversification of experience, is teaching, medicine, nursing, but also engineering.
That's true.
And so I think for those that really want to explore and expand their mind, it's a great profession.
That's a really good point. So that's really good advice. All right. Thanks very much, Rowenna. I really enjoyed that. That was good fun.
No problem at all. Great to be here. Thanks,
all right.
Craig.
Cheers.